Everyone in the boardroom held their breath as the millionaire's pen hovered over the dotted line. The deal was worth over $200 million, and cameras were already flashing to capture the historic moment. But just as the pen touched paper, the doors slammed open. A little girl, no older than 9, stepped in, her voice trembling but loud enough to stop time. "Don't sign it," she cried. "That clause is a trap, and I can prove it." Silence fell like a thunderclap. No one knew who she was, but what she said next shattered the room and his entire world. ChatGPT сказал, the day had begun like any other for Camden Merrick, the self-made real estate tycoon whose name was etched into half the skyline of San Diego. With a perfectly tailored navy suit and a Rolex older than most of his assistants, he walked into the mirrored high-rise conference room on the 32nd floor of Merrick Enterprises with calm certainty. Today, he was set to close the biggest deal of his life, a merger that would not only triple his net worth, but effectively give him control over the Western real estate market. Everything was in place. The media had been invited. His legal team, led by the ever-slick Howard Greeley, was present and smug. The opposing party, a rival firm known for its aggressive acquisitions, waited on the other side of the long walnut table. And in the center, between silver carafes of coffee and mineral water bottles, lay the contract, thick, pristine, final. Camden nodded to his assistant, a young man named Travis, who brought him a Mont Blanc pen on a velvet tray. He cracked his neck, stretched his fingers, and took a deep breath. His signature had always been bold, looping, a sign of dominance. He lowered the pen. That was when the double doors crashed open. Gasps rose around the room. At first, everyone assumed it was some intern who'd lost his mind, or a protester who'd slipped past security, but it wasn't. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 9. Messy braids, a hand-me-down red hoodie too big for her frame, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. In her hands, she held a crumpled paper folder, and her brown eyes were wide with urgency. "Don't sign it," she yelled, her voice echoing against the glass walls. "That clause is a trap, and I can prove it." For a second, no one moved. Everyone looked to Camden, who was frozen mid-signature, his brow furrowed in disbelief. Howard Greeley shot up from his seat, his voice rising with anger. "Who let her in here? Security, get this child out!" But Camden raised a hand, silencing the room. There was something about the girl's voice, something raw and unsettling. He looked directly at her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but low, calculating. The girl stepped forward, chin lifted with defiance. "My name is Alara. I know what's in that contract. I read it last night. Page 87, Clause 14c. If you sign it, they'll take your entire equity portfolio 6 months from now. You'll lose everything." Gasps rose again, this time tinged with disbelief and irritation. Howard chuckled bitterly. "This is absurd. That clause is standard practice. It's legal. She's a child, Camden. She doesn't know what she's saying." But Camden's eyes never left Alara. "How do you know what's in the contract?" I found it," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. "In a recycling bin outside your building last night. Someone tossed it, maybe on purpose. I took it home. My mom used to be a paralegal. She taught me how to read legal language." Camden stood slowly. "And you expect me to believe a little girl just stumbled onto a mistake a team of lawyers missed?" "I didn't say it was a mistake," Alara whispered. "I said it was a trap." Suddenly the mood in the room shifted. Everyone was watching Camden now. His hand went limp, the pen slipping onto the table. Alara took another step forward and opened her folder. Inside were highlighted pages, copies of the contract, annotations scribbled in pen, comparisons to older versions of Merrick Enterprises' standard clauses. She held it out to him. "Please, just read it before you sign anything." Camden reached out, his fingers brushing against hers as he took the folder. He flipped through the pages silently, then stopped at the section she had marked. The room was deathly still. Then he looked up, his face pale, jaw clenched. and slowly sat back down in his chair. No one knew what was going on inside his head, but Alara's words hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't a mistake, it was a trap. And somehow, this little girl had seen what no one else did. Or maybe someone wanted her to. The silence in the room cracked as Camden's trembling fingers ran over the fine print of Clause 14C. Every person around the table waited for him to scoff, to throw the folder back at the girl and laugh off the disruption. But instead, he leaned in, eyes darting across the page, then flipping back to preceding sections. The creases in his forehead deepened, his lips pressed into a tight line. "Howard," Camden said, his voice cutting through the heavy air, "were these modifications in the draft I signed off on yesterday?" Howard, still standing, forced a condescending laugh. "Of course, Camden. You were briefed on all changes. The clause refers to temporary asset management flexibility, standard for this kind of deal. You approved it." Camden's eyes narrowed. He turned a few more pages, then looked back at Alara's annotated notes. They weren't the scribbles of a bored child. They were detailed, precise, and reference older mergers and state corporate codes. "No," Camden said slowly. "This wording is different." He pointed at a line. "Upon merger, equity authority is granted to a third-party trust." That wasn't in the original. This gives the acquiring firm the right to move our entire asset structure into a holding shell and sell it without board approval. Howard's smile flickered. "It's a protective clause, a formality." "Protective for who?" Camden snapped. His eyes flared as he stood. "Because it sure as hell isn't protective for me or our stakeholders." A ripple of gasps and murmurs went through the boardroom. The opposing firm's lead negotiator, a sleek man in a gray silk tie named Vincent Hale, leaned forward, the edge of his mouth twitching downward. "I suggest we reconvene privately," Vincent said quickly. "This is a misunderstanding." Camden ignored him. His focus was entirely on the girl. "Alara," he said, his voice gentler now, "where do you live? Who's your guardian?" The little girl hesitated. She clutched the now empty folder against her chest. "My mom and I live in Delmar, off 11th, but she's sick. She hasn't worked in months. We stay in a rented room above a bakery. I clean there sometimes to help pay. She used to work downtown in a law office until she couldn't." Howard moved to speak again, but Camden held up a hand. "How did you know to come here?" he asked. Alara looked down, then back up, her voice small but steady. "I saw your name on the contract. I knew the Merrick building. I recognized it from the news. I thought if I could get it to you before you signed." Her voice trailed off. She looked around nervously as security finally arrived. 2 tall guards in black polo shirts, unsure of what to do. "Sir, should we escort the girl out?" one asked. Camden turned to them slowly. "Touch her," he said, "and I'll make sure you're unemployed by sundown." The guards stepped back instantly. Camden looked around the room, then spoke with sharp authority. "This meeting is over. The deal is off. Everyone out, now." The room exploded into motion. Shouts, protests, flapping folders, phone calls. Howard was visibly sweating. Vincent Hale barked at one of his aides. Camden walked slowly around the table, his attention still fixed on Alara, as if the rest of the chaos no longer mattered. When everyone had cleared out, he knelt before her. "You just saved me from a disaster that could have ruined everything I built. But you didn't come here for a reward, did you?" Alara shook her head. "No, sir. I just wanted to do the right thing." Camden looked at her a long moment. Then he pulled out his business card and handed it to her. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "you and your mother are going to meet me here. I'll send a car. Tell her to bring any legal documents she still has. If she can spot what a team of Harvard lawyers missed, or chose to ignore, then I have a place for her. And for you." Alara stared at the card as if it were a magic key. She didn't speak, just nodded. As Camden watched her walk out of the room, her small figure framed against the towering skyline, he felt a strange sensation building in his chest. It wasn't just shock. It was the undeniable pull of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. That night, Camden Merrick sat alone in his penthouse office, the city lights sprawling beneath him like molten gold. The events of the day played over and over in his mind, the ink on the pen never touching the paper, the stunned looks of the board members, and above all, the fearless voice of a child piercing through the noise of corporate deceit. He held Alara's folder again in his hands, flipping through her handwritten notes. The depth of analysis startled him. She had cross-referenced dates, inserted sticky notes where terms contradicted previous drafts, and even marked potential federal violations. Her instincts were unnerving. He thought of all the men he had fired for less diligence than this girl had shown in one night. But what haunted him more was something else. Her eyes, the determination, the intelligence, and something unspoken, desperation. By morning, his personal driver had received instructions to pick up Alara and her mother from Delmar. Camden waited in the lobby, pacing. He hadn't told anyone except Travis. Not Howard, not the partners, not even the press, who were still scrambling to understand why the deal had been abruptly called off. When the black car pulled up, Camden stepped forward. Alara was the first to exit, her red hoodie freshly washed but still worn, her sneakers patched with tape. She held her mother's hand tightly. Her mother moved slowly, with caution in her eyes and a slight limp in her step. She was thin, pale, with high cheekbones and sunken eyes that had once belonged to a strong, proud woman. She wore a black coat and clutched a worn leather purse against her chest like armor. "Mr. Merrick?" she asked hesitantly. Camden nodded and extended his hand. "You must be Margaret." She shook his hand, surprised by the warmth in his grip. "I'm not sure what this is about. My daughter said she interrupted some meeting, and I'm sorry if she caused any—" "She didn't cause trouble," Camden said gently. "She prevented catastrophe. For me. For my company." Margaret blinked, her eyes flicking to her daughter. "I'd like to speak to you both privately," Camden added. "Please, follow me." They took the elevator up to the executive floor, where Camden led them into a spacious, sunlit conference room. The table was bare this time, no contracts, no cameras. Just a pitcher of orange juice and a tray of warm muffins Alara eyed hungrily. "Sit, please," Camden said, gesturing. He sat across from them, watching Alara pour juice for her mother before taking a muffin herself. "I don't know how you did it," he began, "but you found a clause that not only stripped me of equity, but would have triggered legal exposure for my entire board. If I had signed it, we'd be in court within the year. You exposed that in one night." Margaret gave her daughter a stunned look. "I taught her a few things," she said softly. "Legalese always fascinated her, but I never imagined—" "She has a gift," Camden said, "and I'd be an idiot not to acknowledge it." He turned to Margaret. "You used to work downtown?" Margaret nodded. "Rexford and Mays. I was a senior paralegal. But then I was diagnosed with lupus 2 years ago. Had to take fewer hours, then no hours. My savings ran out. We moved from apartment to room, and eventually—" Her voice cracked. "I cleaned floors just to eat. I've been applying for jobs again, but with the gaps, no one calls back." Camden leaned forward. "How would you feel about a position here? Flexible hours, healthcare included, salary double what you earned at Rexford. You'd work directly with my general counsel, reviewing contracts for discrepancies." Margaret stared at him, frozen. "And Alara," he added, looking at the girl. "I want to set up a scholarship. Full tuition anywhere she chooses. But more than that, if she's willing, I want her to help my legal team spot traps before they happen." Alara looked up, juice glass halfway to her lips. "Me?" she asked, confused. "But I'm just a kid." Camden smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. "That might be your advantage." Margaret began to cry softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Camden said simply. Margaret reached for her daughter's hand and nodded. "Yes." As Camden stood and shook her hand again, Something else stirred in him. Not business, not profit. Something human and painfully unfamiliar. He watched as Alara handed her mother another muffin, already planning how to get her a new coat. And he realized then he hadn't just been saved from financial ruin. He had been reminded what it meant to build something worth protecting. 3 weeks had passed since that morning, since Alara burst into the boardroom and stopped the biggest mistake Camden Merrick had nearly made in his entire career. In that short time, life inside Merrick Enterprises had changed more than it had in the last 3 years combined. Margaret had begun working part-time in the legal review department, and despite her health battles, her mind was razor sharp. Camden received an email from his general counsel after her first week, stating plainly, "Where did you find her? She's correcting contracts before the software even flags them." Camden had simply replied, "She found me." But it was Alara who caused the biggest stir. Not with her presence, she was quiet, observant, never disruptive, but with her uncanny ability to notice patterns and legal loopholes others couldn't see. Camden had given her permission to shadow 2 of his junior legal analysts twice a week, under the condition that she do her schoolwork at the office during breaks. She obeyed with quiet discipline, sometimes even correcting her textbooks when they contradicted updated legal codes. Still, Camden couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. She was too sharp, too prepared, and too motivated to catch that clause that day. There was something beneath her surface, something unspoken. It hit him one evening as he reviewed her original folder again. He noticed a yellow sticky note on the back of the last page, folded in half. He hadn't seen it before. Opening it, he read one sentence. "The handwriting in the clause doesn't match the rest of the contract." His chest tightened. That wasn't just legal intuition. That was forensic level scrutiny. He pulled out the original contract and turned to page 87. Alara had been right. Clause 14C was inserted in slightly darker ink, with a subtle tilt in the font spacing. Even the paper texture changed slightly, only noticeable when held under light. This wasn't just a trap. It was a forgery. Camden pushed back from his desk and stood abruptly. He made 2 calls, one to Travis, instructing him to get Howard Greeley into his office the next morning without delay. The second to a friend at the district attorney's office. His voice was low, controlled. "I may have discovered a multi-million-dollar fraud attempt inside my company," he said. The next morning, Camden sat behind his desk as Howard strolled in, all fake smiles and arrogance. "You wanted to see me, Cam?" Howard asked, adjusting his cufflinks as he closed the door. Camden didn't answer at first. He handed Howard a copy of the contract, one with forensic notes made by a legal analyst overnight, highlighting inconsistencies between pages, specifically Clause 14C. Howard's face stiffened. "Interesting ink difference, isn't it?" Camden asked quietly. "Too bad it doesn't match any of the official contract drafts from my archives. And too bad it's the exact clause that would have drained my company's value and handed it to Vincent Hale." Howard remained still. "I already spoke to the district attorney," Camden continued. "They're pulling your phone records, and security footage has already been reviewed. You left the original draft unguarded the night before the signing and walked into Hale's suite for 12 minutes. No explanation." Howard finally spoke, his voice cold. "You have no proof I added anything." Camden stood slowly. "I have a little girl's handwriting analysis, my legal team's full report, and now a pending warrant. I don't need proof to fire you, Howard, but I will have proof to bury you in court." Howard stepped back, his mask cracking. "You're throwing away everything we built over a child's paranoia?" he snapped. Camden's eyes narrowed. "Number, I'm reclaiming what I almost lost because I stopped trusting my gut, and I let men like you speak for me." Security escorted Howard out minutes later. Camden didn't watch. Instead, he walked down to the lower floor, where Alara was in a small, glass-walled study room, doing homework beside a paralegal intern. She looked up as he entered, raising an eyebrow. "You were right," he said. She blinked. "About what?" "That clause wasn't just dangerous, it was planted, forged." Her eyes widened, and she leaned back slightly, stunned. "You noticed a different handwriting," Camden said. "That one note of yours on the back page just saved my company from a man I trusted for 20 years. I I didn't know it'd be that serious," Alara whispered. Camden crouched next to her, his voice low but resolute. "Alara, you didn't just catch a legal trick. You uncovered corporate sabotage. That takes a rare mind and a rare courage." She hesitated before whispering, "I was scared that day. I thought they'd throw me out." He smiled. "You scared them instead." As he left the room, he looked back once more and saw something in her expression he recognized in the mirror for years. Wariness, pride, and a small flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, life had more for her than survival. And this time, Camden vowed, he would make sure of it. In the weeks that followed Howard's firing and the exposure of the forgery, Merrick Enterprises underwent a quiet but profound transformation. Camden didn't announce anything publicly. He wasn't one for press statements or dramatic speeches. But internally, the energy shifted. He initiated a full audit of every legal deal signed in the last 5 years. Contracts were unrolled, rechecked, and re-reviewed by fresh eyes. Several more suspicious clauses surfaced, none as egregious as the one Alara had found, but enough to confirm that corruption had seeped deeper into his inner circle than he'd realized. Camden was no stranger to betrayal. You didn't climb from being a warehouse loader to a billionaire without stepping through minefields. But this betrayal had been surgical, personal. It had almost stolen everything he'd built. And if not for one little girl, Alara had become a fixture at headquarters. Everyone knew her now. Some employees thought she was Camden's niece. Others thought she was a gifted intern in a special program. Camden didn't bother explaining. He liked that the mystery made people tread carefully. Her presence commanded respect, not because she demanded it, but because she'd earned it. One afternoon, Camden took Alara and Margaret to lunch on the rooftop terrace, reserved only for executives. It was a bright day, the ocean visible in the distance, and Alara sat across from him, chewing quietly on her grilled cheese, her feet not quite reaching the floor. "I want to ask you something," Camden said, setting down his coffee. Alara looked up. "Have you always been this observant, this good with language, with analysis?" She thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Since I was little, I read a lot. When Mom got sick, I used to read the medical bills. I learned the codes. I liked figuring out what things really meant. Then I started reading her old work files. Some of the terms were hard, but they started to make sense." Margaret smiled faintly, but said nothing. There was pride in her eyes, but also something Camden noticed, a worry that lived behind her smile like a shadow. "Alara," he said softly, "you realize what you did was rare. You're gifted, and I think you know that already." Alara said nothing, but the way her fingers gripped her glass gave her away. She wasn't used to praise. It made her nervous. Camden continued, "There's a special prep school here in San Diego, Horizon Academy. It's rigorous, full of brilliant students, and it's private with a price tag to match. But I'd like to enroll you. Full scholarship, transportation, everything covered." Margaret dropped her fork. "Mr. Merrick, we can't accept that. It's too much." Camden turned to her gently. "It's not charity. I've spent millions on hedge fund consultants who couldn't do what your daughter did in a single night. This isn't me being generous. It's me investing where I see brilliance." Alara sat very still. "But I like being here, in the office. I like helping." "You still can," Camden said. "The school has flex days, and you'll still have your study desk here whenever you want it. But you need to be around other minds like yours. You need challenge, structure, support." Margaret's eyes welled up. She turned her face away and dabbed at the corners with a napkin, embarrassed. Alara looked at her mother, then at Camden. "What if I don't fit in? What if the kids think I'm weird?" Camden leaned forward. "They might. But being weird is usually what makes the world better. Don't let other people's limits become your own. Alara gave a small nod, uncertain but thoughtful. Later that day, after Margaret and Alara had gone home, Camden sat at his office window, watching the sunset burn across the bay. Travis entered without knocking, holding a thin envelope. "This just came, sir. Certified mail, addressed directly to you. No return label." Camden took it, puzzled. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, unsigned. It read, "You should have signed the contract. She was never supposed to find it. But if you think this is over, you're wrong. We're not done." Camden froze. The letter wasn't from Howard. He was already under indictment and trying to cut a plea deal. This was something else. A chill ran through him, not just fear, but the realization that Alara's discovery had exposed not just one man, but a hidden enemy still watching. And whoever it was, they knew where to strike. Camden folded the letter slowly, his jaw clenched. Then he picked up his phone. "Get me security," he said, "now." Camden didn't sleep that night. The anonymous letter sat on his desk, under a paperweight, mocking him with its clean, emotionless threat. Every word replayed in his mind like an echo in an empty room. "We're not done." It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war. By morning, he had already doubled building security, assigned Alara and Margaret private transportation with vetted drivers, and installed surveillance at their apartment. Discreet, but thorough. He didn't tell them about the letter. Not yet. Not until he understood how deep this shadow ran. He ordered an internal investigation, led by a private team from out of state, no more relying on his current staff. He didn't trust anyone anymore, not after Howard, not after the forged contract. The lead investigator, a former federal agent named Linnell Voss, began combing through employee communications and flagged several suspicious activities. Burner phone pings, document downloads at odd hours, and, most concerning of all, a data breach that had been masked under system maintenance. This wasn't sloppy, Linnell told him in his office, flipping through reports. Whoever did this knew how to cover their trail, but they weren't expecting a kid to crack open their plan. Camden looked out at the skyline, the sun casting long shadows across the glass. "I need to know if Alara's in danger." Linnell hesitated. "We don't have proof of a direct threat, but yes, she embarrassed someone powerful, and she's young, vulnerable." Camden turned back to her. "Then I want round-the-clock security for her and her mother. Discreet, no visible agents. I want someone watching them, even if they're buying groceries." Linnell nodded and left. That evening, Camden invited Margaret and Alara to dinner at a private dining hall in the company's lower atrium. Margaret had just received her first full paycheck and insisted on paying for dessert, laughing softly as she handed Camden a $5 bill, which he accepted with a dramatic bow. But under the surface, he was watching everything, every movement near the doors, every glance from passers-by. Alara picked at her salad distractedly. "Is something wrong?" Camden asked gently. She hesitated. "At school today, I found a folded note in my locker. No name. It just said, 'Smart girls don't live long in business.'" Margaret's hand flew to her chest. "What?" Camden's stomach sank. "Did you tell anyone?" Alara nodded. "I gave it to the principal. He said it was probably a prank." "It's not," Camden said firmly. Margaret looked between them. "What's going on? Is she in danger?" Camden took a deep breath. "I was going to wait, but I received a threat too. After Howard was fired, someone involved in that contract is still trying to stay in the game, and they're angry you disrupted them, Alara." Margaret turned pale. "We need to leave. We need to disappear." "No," Camden interrupted. "That's exactly what they want. They want to scare you back into silence. But I'm not going to let that happen." He leaned forward. "Margaret, I will protect your daughter like she's my own. You both stay. We handle this together." Alara looked at him then, for a long moment. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "But I'm tired of hiding." Camden smiled sadly. "Me too." The next day, his investigation team uncovered a name, Elliot Madsen, a silent partner in Hale's firm. former legal architect. Disbarred 3 years ago for unethical tampering with fiduciary accounts in New York, but somehow still pulling strings from the shadows. Linnell brought Camden a photo. He was seen entering a building leased by a shell company 3 blocks from your headquarters, twice in the last month. Guess who else visited the same building? She said. Howard. It all clicked. Madsen was the real author of the clause. Howard had been a pawn, greedy, but not clever enough to write it. Madsen was the ghostwriter behind the trap. And now, that same ghost had Alara in his sights. Camden stood, clenching the photo. Find him, he said, and bring him to light. Linnell hesitated. You realize, if you do this, it might expose everything, including people tied to your company, investors, politicians. Camden met her eyes, then let them burn. It was a Friday morning when Camden received the call that turned everything from tense to explosive. Linnell's voice was low and rapid on the other end of the line. We found him. Madsen. He's staying under a fake name at a private estate outside La Jolla. He's not hiding anymore. He's planning something. We tapped a burner phone he's been using. He mentioned Alara by name. Twice. Camden's heart dropped into his stomach. He was already grabbing his keys as she spoke. Is she safe right now? She's at Horizon Academy. We've got eyes on her, but we should act now. Camden didn't hesitate. I'm coming with you. An hour later, a black SUV pulled up outside a gated property, surrounded by hedges and security cameras. The estate was owned by a dummy corporation that traced back to a now-defunct holding firm in New York. The same firm tied to the fraudulent shell that had nearly seized Merrick Enterprises. It all looped back. All the pieces Alara had hinted at were converging. Linnell and her team moved like ghosts, silent, precise. They slipped past the electronic gate and up the stone path. Inside, Madsen sat in a study lined with fake law books, tapping on a tablet. Camden watched from the window as the man, once respected, now hollow and cruel, sipped his drink with smug ease. He had no idea the storm was already at his door. Linnell gave the signal. Her agents entered. Camden followed behind them, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Madsen looked up, startled as the agents surrounded him. He stood slowly, not resisting. He was lean, gray-haired, with cold eyes that had seen too many secrets. Camden Merrick, he said with a cruel smirk. Didn't think you'd be brave enough to show up in person. Camden stepped forward, locking eyes with him. You targeted a child. She embarrassed me, Madsen replied casually. That kind of humiliation costs something. Not as much as the years you're about to serve, Camden snapped. But Madsen didn't flinch. You still don't get it. This whole world, this game, it runs on leverage, money, and silence. You tear down one wall, 3 more fall on your head. And that girl, that precious prodigy of yours, she made enemies you haven't even met yet. Camden leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Then let them come. But if you or anyone else ever go near her again, I won't need the law to handle you. Linnell signaled the agents, and Madsen was cuffed and removed from the house. As they led him out, he didn't stop smirking. But Camden no longer cared. The man's power had been tied to secrets, and those were unraveling fast. That night, Camden didn't return to the office. Instead, he drove to Alara and Margaret's apartment. They had moved into a better place, still modest, but safe, warm, and dignified. He brought dinner, not as a boss or benefactor, but simply as someone who cared. Over lasagna and sparkling cider, Camden finally told them the full truth. Alara listened, her fork still in midair as she learned that the man who had written the clause she discovered had been a fugitive architect of white-collar corruption, that she had caught the attention of one of the most dangerous minds in the legal underworld, and that her instincts had helped bring him down. Margaret was silent for a long time. Then she stood up, walked over to her daughter, and kissed her forehead. I used to think we were just trying to survive, she said. But Alara, you're rewriting the rules. The girl blinked, then whispered, I'm scared sometimes. Camden nodded. You're allowed to be. That's how you know you're doing something important. Later, as he stood in the hallway, ready to leave, Alara followed him to the door. Do you think it's really over? She asked. He paused. The threat? From Madsen? Yes. But the world that made him? Probably not. Then what do we do? She asked. He smiled, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. We keep doing what you've already started. We shine light in the dark. One contract, one lie, one truth at a time. And for the first time in years, Camden felt something deeper than victory. He felt peace. 2 months later, the courtroom was packed. The trial of Elliot Madsen had attracted the attention of national media. It wasn't just the high-profile corporate fraud. It was the David and Goliath narrative that captured hearts. A little girl who had stopped a billion-dollar crime. Camden Merrick sat in the front row beside Margaret and Alara. Alara wore a simple navy dress and her hair in a neat braid. She didn't fidget. She didn't look afraid. She sat upright, eyes locked on the courtroom doors as if waiting for something bigger than justice. Maybe closure. The judge entered, and the trial began. Over the course of 3 hours, the prosecution laid out evidence meticulously: forged documents, tampered drafts, audio recordings between Howard Greeley and Elliot Madsen, and a timeline of secret meetings spanning almost a year. The star moment came when the prosecutor submitted a folder, Alara's original copy, annotated in a child's neat but strong handwriting. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the prosecutor turned to the jury and said, "This folder, recovered from a 9-year-old girl who read the fine print better than 10 corporate attorneys combined, is what saved Merrick Enterprises and exposed the man behind the scheme." When asked to testify, Camden stepped forward. He gave a calm, deliberate testimony describing the day of the contract signing, Alara's intervention, and the discovery of the forged clause. Then came a surprise. The judge requested to hear from Alara herself. Margaret froze, squeezing her daughter's hand, but Alara looked at her, then at Camden, and gave a small nod. She was sworn in and took the stand, barely tall enough to be seen over the microphone. "Do you understand why you're here, Alara?" the judge asked kindly. "Yes, Your Honor." "And why did you read that contract in the first place?" Alara looked straight ahead. "Because something felt wrong, and I couldn't just let someone sign something that might hurt them. My mom always taught me that if you see something wrong and do nothing, you become part of it." The courtroom was utterly still. The defense tried to object, to rattle her, but Alara didn't budge. She answered clearly, logically, and never once looked at Madsen. She didn't need to. When the jury returned after 2 days of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Madsen was sentenced to 22 years, without parole, for conspiracy, fraud, and corporate tampering. His fall was public, swift, and absolute. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Alara stood between her mother and Camden as microphones reached toward her. "Do you want to be a lawyer someday?" a reporter asked. "No," she said without hesitation. "I want to build something honest. Maybe my own company, one where people like Madsen would never survive the first day." The crowd murmured with admiration. Margaret pulled her close, and Camden, who rarely gave public remarks, stepped in front of the cameras. "I've done a lot of things in my life I thought were important," he said, "but giving this girl the chance to change the world may be the smartest thing I've ever done." He turned to Alara, smiled, and said, "You didn't just save a company. You reminded people that truth still matters." Months later, a foundation was launched in Alara's name, the Alara Initiative, dedicated to teaching children in underfunded schools the power of financial literacy, legal awareness, and ethical thinking. It grew fast, funded by Merrick Enterprises and dozens of donors inspired by her story. Camden gave Alara a personal office at the company, with her name on the door and a small plaque beneath it that read, "Truth has no age." Alara would visit after school some days, sorting through proposals, asking hard questions no one else dared to. She still brought her backpack and lunchbox, still rode her scooter through the lobby, but no one laughed at her. They greeted her like they would a CEO in training. And one evening, long after everyone had gone home, Camden stood at his window again, watching the sunset. He thought about the moment that had changed everything. The second before the signature, the slamming of the doors, the voice that had said, "That clause is a trap." And he smiled, because not all miracles arrive dressed in glory. Some come in red hoodies, with wide eyes and unmatched courage. In my view, the ending of this story captures something rare and deeply meaningful. Justice delivered not through force or power, but through clarity, courage, and conscience. Alara's voice, small but unshakable, stands as a symbol of how truth doesn't always come from authority. It often comes from those overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. That a 9-year-old girl could see through what billionaires and lawyers missed isn't just poetic. It's a quiet rebellion against a system that rewards manipulation and punishes honesty. Camden's transformation is just as powerful. A man hardened by years of success learns to listen, to truly listen to someone who has nothing to offer him but the truth. And in doing so, he doesn't just save his company. He regains his humanity. I find the final note, "Truth has no age," to be one of the story's most poignant messages. In a world drowning in complexity, sometimes it takes the simplicity of a child's question or her refusal to look away to expose the heart of what's right and wrong. It's not just a happy ending, it's a meaningful one that reminds us that no matter how powerful the trap, the truth, when spoken bravely, still has the power to break it.